Hello and welcome to Connections, Forum for Relationships, Expression and Healing. And this is episode 34. Can you believe it? Our show offers single episodes and short series of talks, interviews regarding the most important areas of human life, such as relationship issues, personal expression and self-development, and cultural development as well, and healing these areas. The purpose of our shows is to give you inspirations and also teach you new skills with which to handle the issues which are connected with our topics. Today we are in episode 3 of the mini-series, Your Voice Counts. Sometimes we feel as if our voice is not heard. Others speak to us in a way that we feel misunderstood, and we don't know how to react or just remain silent and resigned. How could that happen? In today's show, the title is Your Assumptions May Silence the Voices of Others. And we will provide some answers by talking with Anne-Cécile Graber. But before I introduce her, some of the information about us, your hosts. I am Margherita Crystal Lotus, an intuitive life and business mentor who helps professional women overcome emotional overwhelm and stress and restore their energy so that they can have fulfilling relationships and watch their career flourish. And Heidi, present yourself.
Yes, hello and welcome. I'm Heidi Hörnlein. I'm from the powerofrelationship.com because I'm a relationship coach and a counselor. And I work with people who feel that they are not really fully realized yet. And I'm also the owner of the Paradiso Integrale in Italy. This is a retreat center and also a cultural association where I organize things together with my husband, Mark Davenport. Yeah, before we go into our transmission, I want to tell you the watches. When you are joining us live, let us know that you are here, where you are from, and join in the conversation, leave your comments. And when you watch later, the replay, please do it as well. We come back to you again. So our special guest for today is Anne-Cécile Graber. She is originally from Paris, and she has lived in Madrid, in London, in Washington, and she's now in Germany, in my home country, in Stuttgart. And Cécile is a blogger with the intention to bridge her knowledge of human behavior with our daily life. Her focus is on how people create organizations that better serve the people involved. Her post on assumptions prompted me to ask her to join us in this hangout here. And this hangout is her first hangout ever, and I hope many will come after that. So her post is a reflection on the implications of emotions, which are hardly ever considered in organizational structures. So, Anne-Cécile, hello and welcome. And I would like to ask you if you want to give some more information about yourself.
Hello. First, I would like to thank you for welcoming me for this nice discussion. I think you said it all. I'm trying to help people realize that our emotions are important and we have to acknowledge them wherever it's at work or at home. But I think at work we tend to think that we take our emotions and we hang them on the, on the wall, and then we enter in the office and we have no emotion at all, and that's not true. So I'm trying to help people realize that emotions are everywhere and we have to pay attention only.
Wonderful. So our title is about assumptions and how they can stop the voices of other people. And it a little bit sounds like as if assumptions is a bad thing, but actually it's not. No, we need to have assumptions to survive, because if we don't assume that people want to live when we go out with a car, and when we don't assume that they don't run into us, we couldn't use the car, we couldn't go out of house. So assumptions is a very important thing. So where do you think the assumptions become problematic?
I think the assumptions, as long as they are, you know, about your safety, like you assume that when the red light is on, no car would come, it's okay to assume that. And but you still have to pay attention and make sure, look right and left, and make sure you can cross the street safely. But I think assumptions are dangerous when you make them about people. And this is, I think, the thing to know is you can assume that when you open the door, it will open. It's not gonna, I don't know, fall on you. It's supposed to be okay. But when you come to a person and you assume by looking at the person or hearing what the person says, something, it could be good or bad. For example, people know that I'm French. So when we go to a restaurant or to buy something for dinner, they ask me all the time, which wine should I buy? And I'm like, okay, I'm French, but I'm not a wine expert. And that's an assumption that people make about French people. And there are assumptions that people will make about your gender, about your skin color, and about your sexual orientation or your political orientation. There are so many assumptions that are blocking us from knowing who the person in front of us is, that we live in our box. And we're like, there is my assumptions about women, and all women fall into those assumptions. And then when a woman comes to you and say, oh, I'm going to build IKEA furniture today, you're like, what? And I'm like, no, well, it's an assumption that women can't do it. That is just an assumption. And those assumptions, they lead people to be close-minded, to put labels or put people in boxes, to totally refute the individuality of the people and to discriminate. And I think that's what I'm very eager and interested about, is making people break those discrimination and those assumptions, because we are all in the end discriminated.
So how do you do that? I mean, how can people become aware that what is going through their head here is an assumption and it's not reality?
Well, for me, the way it works for me, and I think everyone has his own way, but my way is to ask questions. So when I don't know, when I meet a German person, I may assume that they know everything about beer, and I may ask them, oh, which beer should I buy? If we are in a group of international people, I'll be like, hey, you German, tell me what I should drink. And then I should be like, no, I'm assuming that this person knows better about beer, but I'm going to ask the question to the group and not direct the question to one person, who is supposed to know. And sometimes you have very big surprise with I don't know, a Spanish person who will be able to tell you all the beer that exists in a specific city or whatever. So I think asking questions, and one of the questions I like to ask is, if I understand well, you meant, and then that's how I verify that my assumption is right or wrong, and then I can go further and I can ask more questions, and asking the person, what do you mean? Or I don't get you. And I think it's very important for the person to be acknowledged, because when you say, I don't know, I'm not sure, you give them the power to use their voice and to say...
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to this example with the beer. If you ask a person, German person, you should know what kind of beer is the best one, and maybe he's not drinking anything, you know, and so his feeling would be, you know, he feels blocked, he feels seen as if he should know something, but he doesn't know, he or she. I mean, that's the same.
Yeah, that could be.
Or teachers often work in this way, you know. They assume that the students have learned the lesson, and then they come in and they sort of, I don't know the word now, they show off this person. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah.
They put them deliberately in a position where they get ashamed because they don't know what they are asked for, you know. So this is a difficult thing, you know, and you might put people into this situation without even noticing it. So what you say, going very cautious and asking, and what did you mean, what do you mean? And so this is a good way. And actually, I do it so often with my husband, and he gets tired of it. He's listening here in the background. Always these questions, He pretends that I know what he means. So.
Yeah, that's the problem too. It's pretending that everyone knows, pretending that the way I do things is the way everyone does it. Like, I think we can see it in different cultures, but it could be also between people. But simply the way we eat at a table. Well, in Europe we eat with a knife and a fork, but in India or in other countries they may eat with their hands, and that doesn't mean they're dirty. It's just the way they do, and the way we do in Europe is with like knife and forks. So it's just another way of doing things. That doesn't change the person, or there is no value in it. It's just a way of doing things. But do not assume that the person is not educated because she or he eats another way. So it's linked to so many things, those assumptions. Because I do that this way, so everyone has to do it this way. Well, no, because you're just one person, one exemplary with a thousand of people around. There may be other people doing like you, but not everyone. And just being aware of that, I think, is very important to keep in mind when we are in interaction with people.
Wonderful. Margherita, what is your take on assumptions?
Yes, assumption is something that is like a shortcut in the mind. And if we have a habit of doing those shortcuts in the mind and not aware of how the other people are reacting to it, then we really throw out some small grenades to the other people, and they get affronted. I can only go to my own experience in a relationship when my partner, for example, assumed that I would have the same view on a particular problem as he had. And then so he assumed that. So when that wasn't so and I got an emotional reaction, he couldn't understand it. And he proceeded to continue having that view. And then I felt really shut down by that.
Yeah, I think it's these things about not being aware that the other one is not listened to. I think it's linked to assumptions, because we will always assume that the person in front of us understands what we say. We assume. So when I say black, my black may be darker than the black that another person thinks is black, or colors like yellow or orange. We can fight for hours, and I can say that the background that you have, Heidi, is for me red, but maybe someone else with his camera will see it purple, and the thing is, at the end, the color of the wall is not important, but we take this as a fight, and we will start to argue about the color, but who cares? It's just a color. And it's nice to know that we have different vision and different colors, like some people are colorblind or not, but as long as we assume that everyone sees the world with the same eyes as us, we won't be able to understand each other. So I can accept that the red behind you is not red for my neighbor, but it's purple in his language or in what he sees. And there are sometimes discussions where you decide to buy. Last time I decided to buy some furniture, and I wanted something red. So I had in my mind red, and we ended up in the shop, and there were different kind of red, but my red was like very strong, and I had my idea, and people would come to me and like, no, this is not red, this is purple, and at some point I was like, okay, I realized I was not going anywhere, and I said, I tried to describe my red, and some people would be like, you mean, and they would name the red with a special name I don't even remember. But then I realized there is a language for everything. And we may not know that the language we use is also made of assumptions itself. So assumptions are everywhere, simply. So let's just be careful with those.
Can I ask you a question there, Anne-Cécile?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is, in your view, how would we share this idea, how we can have awareness of our own assumptions? What do you think?
Well, it's funny because I created an exercise to let people realize that they had assumptions. And the idea is to take a group of people and take pictures of an object. So you take a chair and you take the chair from all directions. You take pictures from all directions. And then you ask the people to go separately into groups, and you tell them to describe the object without saying it's a chair. So they have, by describing the object, they have to be able to describe it, and the person who didn't see the picture should be able to draw a chair in the end. And you'd say to the people they have different objects. And then you make them come back, you tell them, oh, I lost the way, but basically you tell the people to come in the room, they think they have different objects. And you tell them to draw, and the draw should look like something, but nothing like a chair. And then you let the people speak about the object. It's a taboo play. So you should not say it's a chair, but you should be able to describe it. And then at this moment, people will start to fight about, no, I tell you, there is a line should be going like this way, and not a line this way. And you ask them to pause and to write how they feel at this moment. And then you tell them, we're going to do the same game. You tell them to go back in the room. And you tell them, now you're going to be describing the same object. And they do the exercise, and they come back in the room. And this time they will cooperate, weirdly, because they know they're looking at the same thing. So they're going to try to connect their idea. And that's where I think the game of this game would be, it's interesting because you see visually and you feel it, that there is a way. You have the two times you have the same object in the picture. The first time you don't know you're talking about the same thing, you fight. The second time you know what you're talking about, and this time you speak. And that's what I think are those assumptions, because in the first part you assume you know and the other one doesn't. In the second part of the exercise, you assume that you have the same object, so there should be a connection, so. And so you will ask more questions and be like, okay, I think I have the chair from the back. And you, oh, I think it's from the side. And then you end up with pictures that were 2D, 2 dimensions, and you should be able to draw a 3D picture. So that's how I see it. Doing this little exercise of waking up people and be like, oh my God, I assumed that. Well, I'm going to be more careful later.
This is a wonderful exercise, and I just wanted, the preparation of this exercise is the knowledge that you see things from different perspectives. I see you from this perspective, and I see my husband from that, and so on. You see me from another one. And as in relationship to what perspective people look at an object, they see a different thing. And even if it's the same object, you know, and I didn't find a very good example, but when I show you this thing, you would describe it as something very flat, maybe flat 1 centimeter high. Yeah. And then there is somebody else who sees it from here, from up here, and it says, no, this is big. This is about, I don't know, 15 centimeters per 12 centimeters. And then the other says, no, this is only 1 centimeter high. And no, don't you see, this is much bigger, no? And so this is normally where fights begin, because people see the things in different perspectives, and they assume that the others see the same thing from the same perspective. And when I'm right, no, because I see it, and you are wrong. And there wars begin like that. So
Exactly.
So we have a comment from Albert Spalding, and he said that's so true because I'm colorblind. It just seems I can't get my colors right. So that's a very good comment. Thank you, Albert.
yeah, we just assume that everybody sees the surroundings as we do, and they don't. And they don't. My point was, when we insist that our vision is the right one, our perception is the right one, our interpretation is the right one, our assumption is the right one, then we give really, it's the beginning of misunderstanding, beginning of conflict. And that's the same in a relationship, you know. It's between partners. It's most of the misunderstandings, most of the conflicts and the fights come from so little things like that.
Yeah, that's totally true. And you were talking about wars starting like that, and I think there are also cultural misunderstandings where people, because they grew up sometimes in a culture that was racist, they assume it's normal, and they don't go. Some people would, for some reason, go over it and realize that it's totally silly, that we are all the same, and we should not worry about being black or white or being not like people want you to be, because that also comes back to that when you make assumptions, you're not open-minded and you're not open to doubt. And I think that's why people make assumptions. They're afraid to doubt. They're afraid to ask questions when they're not even sure of the answer. And I think this uncertainty leads people to be so sure about what they don't know, so sure that what they see, what they think, what they feel is the same for everyone, because it's comforting to say, well, if everyone is like me, so why should I wonder? Why should I ask questions? Because I'm right, and if I'm right, they should be all right. But most of the time, no. Most of the time, if you don't ask questions, if you just go with what you've learned from your culture and from the life your life experiences, without wondering, without taking the time to pause and ask yourself questions, you will end up very close-minded and closed. And when you're closed, you don't touch the other person, you don't understand the person, and there is no relationship possible. And I think that's problematic.
You are talking about the fear which is behind not to be secure, and people who, you know, who would be interested in your point of view and how you see the thing, they fear that they have given up their own position which they have created for themselves. And then what? What can I do when they fear to lose themselves? And so it takes a big step of growth, of willingness to growth, to let go of needing to be right all the time and needing to know everything all the time, and allowing to others to be right too and know something too. What do you say, Margherita?
Yeah, I was thinking about that there must be a fear hiding inside that we want to hide behind. I mean, we have the fact, right, like I was thinking when we first started to discuss this about the experiments that done in I don't know if the Buddha said it or something, but they had a room, and then they had an elephant in that room, and then it was all dark. The 6 people went into that room, and then they went on each side of this elephant and then touched it. And so it's like a similar experience that you show the little cover there, and it's this one and it's this one, right? Yeah. So I mean, it's been known a long time in everywhere. But what do you think, Anne-Cécile, that what is the greatest fear here for people who are assuming?
That's a good question. I would like to know, because maybe if I knew, I could be able to help them. Because I think they're probably afraid. It's a very good question, because if I think you were raised to believe assumptions or to ask questions. And so the people who were told since they're very young, this is it. There is no other option. This is the only, like, there is just one answer. There is just one possible life for you. There is just one. Then if you tell them no, the world is full of possibilities, it's stressful, because they have to, when you come to the realization that there is just not one way of doing things, there is just not one answer to every question, that to come to a mathematical questions, there is many ways to come to the same result, but at school we learn just one way, because it's easier to explain that 1 + 1 = 2, and that you could do also 0.5 + 0.5 + 0.5 to end up equaling 2. So the end up result is always the same, but there are many ways to get there. So we will all die one day. So the way to go to our death is just we have to build it. And some people are raised to go on rails, and they're told, you're going to be a doctor, and they become a doctor, and they follow the way, and I think that's those people who are the most afraid, because if we tell them you can ask questions, you have the choice, what do they do with the choice? Because they didn't learn how to choose. And I think that's where people make assumptions, such a strong habit, because they don't have to have existential questioning, like, why am I here from? Or is my life meaningful? Or I don't know, you know, those questions that some people will never ask themselves because they're too scary. And
that's
it comes
very, very
all the
cool.
way. Oh, it's a nice one too.
That's very, very important, I think, Anne-Cécile. And I have a comment here from Carrie Luckett. He says, or she says, I particularly enjoyed the conversation on perspective, that various perspective provides the onlooker with a different assumption. It reminds me of an essay by Susan Sontag where she claims that a photograph is merely a representation of a point of view of an object, not the truthful representation of the object. So it's about manipulation. And that's where the fear comes in, right?
Yeah.
I don't like the word manipulation, because it would mean that you intentionally do it. And you don't intentionally look at the world through your eyes, you just do it. But the manipulation would be in the idea that you are the only one who has the truth. That's the manipulation, to try to impose your idea on someone else. But the view itself is not a manipulation, it's just a fact.
What I would, coming back to what you said before, you are describing the path of growing up. You know, you learn in childhood certain rules, and this is fine, you need to learn them. And when you become a doctor, because your parents told you, I mean, you are in a sort of, you try to please your parents, you know. And then you come to the realization, maybe you don't want to be a doctor, you want to do something else. And then there comes the moment of conflict. Shall I displease my parents? Shall I risk that they get angry? Or shall I go for my life? You know? And this is what many people have fear of. And so they prefer to believe that what they think and what they do is all right, and even it might be the concept of somebody else, which they just have taken over as because it gives them security. But as soon as they need to see the world from few perspectives, from more perspectives, because this is the growing up process, to see the world from ever more perspectives, then, you know, they come into this conflict, and growing up means to go through this conflict and go to a decision, make a decision, which is in alignment with your values, with your real values, and not with the values of your culture, your tribe, your whoever put it into you.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it's also nice to be aware that people, like when you're a child, you don't realize all those things. It comes when you're a teenager, when you start to rebel. I have to say, I didn't rebel when I was a teenager. I didn't have the crisis that you're supposed to have. But I can understand that there are some conflict at this time, because the child is realizing, hey, I'm an individual, I can take decisions. And some decision will be good for the individual, and they may be bad. And then the roles of the parents have to be, I think, as a guide and not as someone who imposes rules. Someone who explains there are rules, you have to understand those rules, why they're built, and if you understand why they're built, then you open your mind, and if you understand that on the highway you can only go at 130 kilometers because of safety reasons, because of the environment and all those things, you will follow this rule. But if you don't understand the rule and you're 16, you are probably not going to follow it. So the best way is, again, to explain, to break up those assumptions that because it's a rule, I assume everyone will follow it, and take the time to explain and to say, well, why do you think we have this rule? And the child should be able to find reasons for the rule. And when we find a reason for a rule or for a way of doing things, then it's easier to live with it. And then when those children are obliged, or not obliged, but pushed through one way, those questions are not asked. And I think the parents too are very scared because they want their children to be happy, to have a meaningful life, or at least to have a successful life, whatever success is for those parents. And then they push, thinking that they're doing the right thing, but they avoiding to have this discussion or their own assumptions as parents. What do they assume is a good life? And what do they assume a child should do? And then they don't see their child as an individual. They see the child as a repetition of themselves that should do it better. So I think assumptions are present everywhere, and they are present in the education, they are present in organization, they're everywhere.
So we have a comment by Kirsten Hancock, and she says, I'm a former primary teacher. All children are required to conform in educational institutions. It is so important that as parents we teach our children to think for themselves and be independently responsible decision makers. That is such a great comment, Kirsten. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
What do you say about that, Anne-Cécile?
I think she's totally right. It's important for the parents to realize that they have a role, that their role is to teach a child to think by himself. School is there to teach them mathematics, history, things that help to build a culture and a nation around the same knowledge, and to be able to work, to live together, and be able to assume we know the same thing, so we should be able to understand each other. But the role of the parents is really to guide the child and to help him understand who he is and where he is in the world, and try to help him as much as they can to answer the question, what do I want to do? What do I enjoy? What are the things that I just don't like to do? And I think it's not like if you're a musician and you love music and you have children and you want them to play music. Okay, that's nice because it's your passion, I understand. But don't try to force your child to go to piano music when you would like to be playing guitar or whatever. Just try to find a way to please the parent and the child, because they can both have pleasure playing music together. But if you impose and not try to understand what the child needs, then because you assume he will have the same like, it's not the way to do it.
Yeah, I think you assume that parents are able to do that, because I think many parents are not. They first need to be quite developed themselves to be able to guide a child in this way, And then the other thing, what you said, that the school is there to give the information and so on, and to learn mathematics. Yes and no. I think the school of today should really change a lot, and should teach people how to think, how to use the information they can find everywhere. Instead of learning information here in Italy, children learn by heart whole books. And this makes no sense at all anymore with the internet. The information you can have everywhere, but they need to learn how to think themselves and how to connect this information which they can find everywhere, and how to create their opinion opinion, which for me is a different thing as an assumption. No? So, as I said, I don't agree that schools should continue to do what they do.
Well, I agree with you on that the school system should totally change, because yeah, we are, like, school should be reviewed, but I was answering the question for now, right now. That's the way it's built, and I totally agree. There are many things to change, and children should be helped to grow. Also at in the school system, it's, for me, I think it's very weird to have lections about mathematics and all those things and nothing about relationships, simply how to handle a conflict. There is ways to do it, but if you don't learn it, who will tell you? If you are in a family where conflicts are not well solved, you will carry on not solving, like having conflicts. So yes, at school there should be things where you are helped to understand what's happening around you, and I think philosophy is a good way to start, but not the philosophy that I learned. For example, in France, I had to write dissertations on what's freedom, and I had to cite people, and I'm like, well, if you're just asking me to read books and to cite people, I'm not interested. I want to write about what I think. And when a teacher would give me a bad grade because I wrote a very nice paper but there was no citation, I'm like, what do you prefer? That I have my own ideas that I'm sure someone else had before, because I'm very young, but people before me thought, so it's not a surprise that my ideas are shared with others. Or you prefer that I just, take the book and say it again, or in my way, and say, oh, someone else said it. And that's where I don't like the school system in general, because it's just using what you've learned, not saying it's yours. But if you can't use the thing as yours and be like, oh, I had this idea on my own, then you can't think. You can just repeat. And repetition, we're not, is it pyrock? Like those animals that repeat what we teach them. So, yeah.
Isn't it so that you want to reach a consensus and authority on some topic, and the school system and government and all that, you want to have a source that's accredited, verified, and then, let's say if you've written a book, then you have the right to say your opinion. I mean, this is maybe how it is in science, which I come from, math and chemistry and stuff. And you can't just have an opinion about how these water molecules goes together. No, you have to have an experiment and show it, and then have it from a source where there has been testing done and it's verified and it's published in a scientific journal. I mean, they have applied the same thing to relationship and interactions with people. That, I mean, this is so personal. And this is new. And I think that, for my personal opinion, is that every single individual in the universe must have this. And it has been removed from the school. Instead, we feel, like when I grew up, I felt like, okay, I have to follow all the rules, and I follow all the rules, I might get to say something. And I think that's very wrong.
I think we need, as a society, as a culture, come into the recognition that we are in an evolving universe, and that as people we are evolving. And when we choose to stay fixed in a certain level, it's bringing us nowhere. We are sort of pushing down every development. So first, as I said, we need to evolve as adults, for then be able to guide the younger generations in a good way, and not shut them in a box, you know. Yeah, so our assumptions of many people is that life is as it is and nothing else, to reach, have success, do that what the others say, you know, and do everything as other people tell you what is right, but it's not. You know, when you come into a, let's say, higher level of consciousness, you see that this is not. But it means to come there, you have to have some, let's say, existential crisis. You would have, I mean, we had it, I had it, and many people I know, to really give value to other things. I was also educated as a scientist, and let's say I studied mathematics and physics at the beginning, and then I learned thinking in a very linear way, but I understood this is not the way for living, for having relationships, for being in communication with others. There we need different skills. We need also, what is very important, emotional intelligence. We need to learn how to know how to handle our emotions, to know our emotions first, to get in touch with them instead of trying to flee, to go away because, I don't want to feel that, Yeah. So we really need to do these steps all together and to not assume that life is what it is just now and nothing better comes. This is a real, my parents told me that, but I don't believe it anymore. We are quite at the end now of our episode, and I would like to ask you, let's say first, Margherita, your takeaway on this.
Well, my takeaway of this is we're scratching the surface. I think we should do a whole other series of assumptions alone, because it's such a vast area. We could tie in every single thing in assumptions, because it's the assumptions that leads us on the path. If I have a correct assumption, I can prove it, like in the scientific experiments, I'm going to reach the goal. But assumptions also expose the anomalies and the issues in other persons, so they can work on them. If you have an emotional response and get really mad, of course you have to work that out within yourself. And if you didn't have that issue, you would just see that would be the other person's issue and not yours. And so that's my takeaway. I think we should do more of this. It's awesome. Thank you so much, Anne-Cécile.
You're welcome.
Anne-Cécile, how was your first hangout on air?
Very nice. I'm very happy. I really like the conversation, and I think, as Margherita said, we touched so many things. There are so many little subjects within assumptions that we could talk about all the different type of assumptions, because now I realize there is just not one type. And I think it would be nice to carry on the conversation and try to define the different type of assumptions we make, and how for each one maybe to get away, to find a way to not assume that we know, that we assume whatever we're assuming. And I think it's also nice to come back to the fact that assumptions are also very important. We cannot live without assumptions, because if we had to verify every assumption we make, we will never go out of the room, because we would verify all the time and it would become like a tick. So there are things we have to assume. So we have to assume that most of the people will follow the rules, but still be safe, play safe. Assume that when you push a button to call a lift, it will come. And that's a normal assumption. But I repeat, when you come to a person, never assume anything. I think that would be my conclusion. When it comes to someone, never assume anything.
Thank you. This is a very, very wonderful conclusion, and exactly that, what, for instance, we as health professionals should do when a client comes to us. Not assume anything, not because it's gray hair that it's old, and or long hair or red hair or something, all these, but really be there and listen openly, put away your criticism, put away your judgment, and just see what really is. And when we are in contact with people, as you have suggested, Anne-Cécile, ask questions. Because if I assume that you like, I don't know, potato salad, you know, because once when I met you the first time, you said, oh, your potato salad is wonderful, you know, and now I prepare for you all the time potato salad, but you don't like it, you know. I should have asked you, do you really like it, that I do it all the time for you? So you put the other person in the prison of needing to upset you when you say, you know what, I don't like potato salad. So it's better you, before you make a habit out of your assumption, of your conclusions, really to ask what is the reality for the other person. So this would be my takeaway, how do you say, bring away, offer, take to action, no, call to action for our listeners. And yes, let's do some other episodes around that. So thank you very much, everybody. And Margherita, next week, what is on next week?
First, I want to mention from Carrie Luckett. She says that the last line in her comment got lost, and it's about the discussion of manipulation of the material object, and the whole book is titled On Photography. And I think she mean that you can actually portray a object in a different way to manipulate it and show the different features, let's say. And so thank you for that comment, Carrie. Yes. And next week we're meeting again, and we're going to try to do it from our own Hangout page. We'll see how that will go. And let's see here. I'm going to...
We have a new website, hangoutsonconnection.com, and also a page on Google Plus with Connection Forum, and we are doing a lot of trials to do the next episodes from there to become a little bit more professional. Margherita is really good in doing this.
Yeah, the next episode on connections is Your Voice Counts, another series, episode in this series, and how to get rid of, let's see if I have, how to get rid of that inner self-talk that drives us crazy. And we have invited George Green to participate with us there. And so looking forward to see you at that time.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.